Scary telling.
As the captain of the ship, I was always on the lookout for any signs of distress on the open sea. It was my duty to ensure the safety of my crew and our vessel, no matter what dangers we may face. And on that fateful day in the Strait of Java, we faced one of the most horrifying circumstances we had ever encountered. We spotted a tiny rocky island about the size of a tennis court and decided to investigate. As we got closer, we saw something that made us all freeze in shock: a young girl, about 10 years old, chained to the rock. It was a most atrocious thing to witness. My crew and I quickly got to work, using our tools to break the chains and free the girl. We were relieved to see that she was still alive, but she was unresponsive and seemed to be in shock. I attempted to communicate with her, but she could not, or would not, speak. Despite the bizarre circumstances of our discovery, we were all glad to have rescued the child. We brought her aboard the ship and tended to her needs, naming her Lilith for the time being. However, as the days passed, a strange sort of pall fell upon the ship, like a dark cloud hovering over us. Some of the older sailors spoke of bad premonitions, and I couldn't help but feel that they were right. It wasn't long before strange occurrences began to happen on the ship. We found things misplaced. Tools and supplies that we were sure had been put away neatly were suddenly scattered about. And then we found the food stores riddled with vermin. All manner of insects, odd-looking specimens had gotten into the food, spoiling a large portion of it. The cook swore the storage was clean till the previous day, and I believe that to be true. That the ship had suddenly acquired a horde of insects was a baffling mystery. Despite our best efforts to keep our spirits up, the crew began to grow restless and uneasy. The rising hostility towards Lilith was apparent, and I overheard some deck boys discussing throwing her overboard. As the captain, it was my duty to maintain order and prevent any harm from coming to the child we had rescued. I tried to reassure the crew that Lilith was not the cause of our misfortunes, but their suspicions continued to grow. I knew then that something sinister was at work, and that our rescue mission had brought us more than we had bargained for. As I write this now, I am haunted by the memories of that fateful day, and I can only hope that whoever finds this letter will heed my warning and avoid the horrors that await those who cross paths with Lilith. The discovery of Lilith had already caused enough unease among the crew, but the nightmare that the Navigator experienced made things much worse. I could see the fear in his eyes as he recounted his dream to me. Lilith standing on the deck, her eyes fixed on him as he tried to steer the ship through a storm, her voice urging him to crash the ship into the rocks. It was a terrifying vision, and one that I couldn't shake off easily. As the days passed, the Navigator's behavior became increasingly erratic. He was constantly looking over his shoulder as if he was being followed, and he seemed to be on edge all the time. I tried to talk to him, to reassure him that everything was going to be all right, but he refused to listen. One night, things took a tragic turn. The Navigator grabbed a gun and ran out onto the deck, shouting that Lilith was the cause of all our troubles. The crew tried to stop him, but he was too quick. He put the gun to his head and pulled the trigger, killing himself instantly. The rest of the crew was shocked and terrified by what had happened. It was as if the nightmare had become a reality, and we were all living in a waking nightmare. The other crew members began to have nightmares and hallucinations as well, and I could feel the tension on the ship growing every day. As the captain, it was my responsibility to maintain order and keep my crew safe, but I was at a loss as to what to do. I knew that Lilith was somehow connected to all of this, but I didn't know how to prove it or what to do about it. The days and nights blurred together as we sailed on, lost and directionless. The tension on the ship was palpable, and I could feel the hostility towards Lilith growing stronger every day. The crew began to blame her for our misfortunes, believing that she was somehow responsible for the Navigator's death and the strange occurrences that continued to happen on the ship. I knew that I had to do something before things got out of hand. I tried to talk to Lilith to get her to open up to me, but she remained silent and unresponsive. It was as if she was unaffected by everything that was happening around her. As we sailed on, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were all being watched, that something was waiting for us in the darkness. And as we sailed further into the unknown, I realized that we were all in grave danger and that Lilith was at the center of it all. We were lost at sea, adrift and directionless. Our provisions were running low, and we were all hungry and thirsty. The strange occurrences on the ship continued, and I could feel the crew's tension and fear growing stronger every day. It was as if Lilith had brought a curse upon us, and we were all suffering for it. The crew blamed her for everything that had gone wrong, and I could see the rising hostility towards her in their eyes. The ship's provisions suddenly became riddled with vermin again, and we were forced to throw out a large portion of our already meager supply. The cook swore that the storage was clean until the previous day, but I knew better than to believe him. Despite our efforts to ration our supplies, we were all growing weaker every day. The crew was desperate, and I could see the fear and despair in their eyes. I knew that we had to do something before it was too late. I called a meeting with the crew and tried to reassure them that we would make it through this ordeal. I knew that our only chance was to work together and stay strong. But as I looked around the room, I could see the doubt and fear on their faces. The rising hostility towards Lilith was palpable, and I knew that I had to take action. I ordered that Lilith be kept under close watch at all times to ensure that she didn't cause any more trouble. But even as I tried to keep the peace, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something terrible was going to happen. We were all on edge, waiting for the next disaster to strike. As the days passed, our situation grew more desperate. The crew was hungry and thirsty, and I knew that we wouldn't last much longer without help. I ordered that we set up a signal, hoping that someone would see us and come to our rescue. But as the days turned into weeks and no help arrived, the crew began to lose hope. They started talking about taking matters into their own hands, about throwing Lilith overboard and trying to save themselves. I knew that I had to act fast before things spiraled out of control. I called a meeting with the crew and tried to calm them down, but it was too late. The rising tension and hostility had reached a breaking point, and I knew that something terrible was going to happen. As the tension on the ship continued to mount, we sailed deeper into the unknown. The days and nights blurred together, and I could feel the crew's fear and desperation growing stronger every day. And then one day, the fog rolled in. It was thick and dense, like a wall of smoke, and it enveloped our ship completely. I couldn't see more than a few feet in front of me, and the air became still, completely halting our movement. The crew was terrified, and I could hear their panicked whispers as they huddled together on the deck. It was a deathly stillness, the kind I had not felt even on land, befell us. As the days passed, the fog refused to abate, and we were trapped in its grasp. We were thirsty and hungry, and the crew was on the brink of madness. I could hear Lilith's chanting, growing louder and more powerful as time passed. The crew began to talk about abandoning the ship, about jumping into the sea and trying to escape their fate. But I knew that it was too late, that we were all trapped in the fog's grasp, and that there was no escape. As the days turned into weeks, the crew's desperation grew more pronounced. They were delirious with thirst and hunger, and I could see the fear and despair in their eyes. And then, one day, I saw something in the fog. It was a shape, a shadow moving through the mist. I couldn't make out what it was, but I knew that it was something terrible. I ordered the crew to prepare for whatever was coming, but it was too late. The shape grew closer, and I could see that it was Lilith, standing at the bow of the ship, her eyes fixed on us. The crew was terrified, and I could hear their screams as they tried to run. But it was too late. Lilith's chanting grew louder, and the fog closed in around us. As I write this now, I am haunted by the memories of that day. The fog swallowed us whole, taking the ship and the crew down with it. I do not know what became of Lilith, but I know that she was at the center of it all. The reader is left to ponder the true nature of Lilith and the fate that befell the ill-fated crew. It becomes clear that Lilith was not an innocent victim, but rather a harbinger of doom, leading the crew to their tragic end. I woke up to find myself on the shore of a deserted island, alone and disoriented. The memories of the ship and the crew came flooding back to me, and I knew that I was the only survivor. I searched the island, hoping to find some sign of life, but it was empty. I was stranded, with no hope of rescue or escape. And then I found it, a piece of parchment, with the words to the person who has found this note: "It is of utmost importance you deliver this message to your commanding officer," written on it. It was a message from the captain of the ship, warning whoever found it of the danger that Lilith posed. I realized then that I had to find a way to deliver this message, to warn others of the horrors that awaited them. Days turned into weeks, and I survived on what little I could find on the island. I tried to build a raft, hoping to sail to safety, but it was no use. I was trapped, alone and afraid. And then, one day, I saw a ship in the distance. I lit a signal fire, hoping that they would see me and come to my rescue. And they did. A rescue ship came to my aid, and I was brought back to civilization. I delivered the message from the captain, warning others of the danger that Lilith posed. And I knew then that I had done what I could to prevent anyone else from suffering the same fate as the ill-fated crew. But even as I tried to move on from the horrors of my past, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was watching me, that Lilith was still out there, waiting for her next victim. As I write this now, I am haunted by the memories of that fateful journey, and I can only hope that whoever reads this message will heed the warning and avoid the horrors that await those who cross paths with Lilith.